Senate overwhelmingly passed a bill. The Assembly is considering a ban on assault weapons and a 7-bullet limit on magazines, which would take effect immediately. The law would further restrict assault weapons to define them by a single feature, such as a pistol grip. Current law requires 2 features. Governor Cuomo has indicated that he would sign the bill into law immediately, even waiving off the 3-day aging process. If you'd like to read the entire bill, we've provided a link on our website, YNN.com.
New York State is set to make a decision on whether to allow hydraulic fracturing to go forward next month. Governor Cuomo has said repeatedly that that decision will be based on the science. In Silver
Mr. Goodell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, and all my colleagues know, we've banned assault weapons, and they've been banned in New York State since 1994, almost 20 years ago. And this bill, while it increases the definition and adds more restrictions on the definition of assault bans, doesn't remove any assault ban or any weapons, any guns that are out there now. Every gun that is out there today, that's lawful today, will be lawful tomorrow. That's what this bill does. Nothing. It doesn't take any of those guns away. It doesn't take them out of circulation. So what does this bill do? What it does is requires about 1 million rifle owners, about 1 million of them, to register their rifle. And if they don't, they're subject to a Class E felony. And every 5 years they have to renew that registration, and if they don't, it's a Class A misdemeanor. So we take 1 million people who today lawfully own a gun, and we require them to go through this registration process so they become a felon. 1 million people. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking that this actually did anything about gun control, because it really doesn't. We could say, oh, what a great victory, because now with your 10 bullet clip, you can only put 7 in. None of us here, not one of us, thinks for 1 second that a criminal is going to stop at 7, are they? They're going to go and they'll put 10 in, and the only one who stops at 7 is the hapless individual who's trying to comply with the law. We have a unique law here where we require that you report weapons that's been stolen from you within 24 hours of finding out about it, or you're guilty of a misdemeanor. That's unique, and we're making history where we arrest the victim. For all these reasons and others, I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Debates with great interest, and if I may distill what I have taken away from it, it is that this bill will affect those who do not commit crimes, and those who commit crimes will not be affected by this bill. Therefore, I vote against it. Thank you.
Mr. Noje in the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think by going around the normal legislative process, we have created a piece of flawed legislation. We received this bill and got the first look at it at 11 o'clock. Just today, we have discussed the need to amend this bill, to fix this bill on some of the flaws that are contained in it. We have heard that this legislation will avert situations like Sandy Hook. Unfortunately, this bill doesn't even, this bill will not do that. This is a bill of missed opportunities. This bill will not do that. This is a bill of missed opportunities. This bill doesn't even, this bill will not do that. This is a bill of missed opportunities. There are so many issues surrounding this that we have not even touched upon. A lot of times these children that strike out have been subject to taunting and bullying in our schools, to the point where we had a young girl that couldn't take it anymore and jumped in front of a train. Others will strike out against the people that have tormented them. We haven't touched that. We haven't touched violent video games. that have desensitized our children to this type of violence. What I have in front of me today that you expect me to vote upon is a flawed piece of legislation that everybody admits has to be fixed. Well, I'm voting on this bill that's in front of me today. I'm told, don't worry about it. We will fix it. My problem is fixing this bill and the chapter amendments are going to wind up on top of that pile underneath the mandate relief that we were promised 2 years ago and never got. I will.
Right now, members of the New York State Assembly are voting on gun control legislation. The Senate passed the bill last night with a 43-18 vote. Let's take a live listen in now from the Assembly session as legislators cast their ballots and explain.
Different sense of the use of those words. It will feel good to know that assault weapons and high-capacity magazines can no longer be legally sold in the state of New York. And it will feel good to know that we today are taking steps, meaningful steps, against a very well-funded special interests to make sure that there'll be fewer occasions when we need to have the mass sale of 20 little coffins the next time someone decides to go in and commit mass murder and mayhem in a school in the United States. And finally, let me say this simply about the Second Amendment. Those who wrote the Second Amendment, those who gave us democracy, they pledged their lives, their sacred honor, and their fortunes for democracy. It is incomprehensible. It is impossible to imagine that those who wrote the Constitution would ever for a moment have been so complacent as to tolerate the mass killings that occur in this nation far too often. New Yorkers are proud of what we are doing here today, and I have no doubt that the founders would have been proud as well, and I am proud to cast my vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Levine in the affirmative. Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, this was an important and significant debate today on the floor, because what it has done is really exposed with the real intent and potential, and I think real outcome of what this piece of legislation is going to do. The real intent, from the logic I've heard on the floor here today, is to make innocent, honest, law-abiding citizens, law-abiding gun owners, criminals. And the byproduct of a part of this legislation is to create a false sense of security. Because let me reiterate, there were 769 murders in New York State. What you're telling your constituents is you made them safer today by banning the vehicles of potentially impacting up to 5 of those homicides. When in comparison, 31 homicides took place with blunt instruments like a hammer. Let me say it again. You took away the opportunity for that vehicle who potentially might have impacted 5 lives when 31 lives were taken away with a hammer or a blunt instrument. But it gets worse than that. I heard your members get up on the floor and said, we've got to redefine the Second Amendment, or what I would call now the 1.5 Amendment, because you've diminished it after this bill passed. The new definition for the Second Amendment is you can only have, as a taxpayer, 1 gun with 1 bullet in it. And when those gangbangers, those 5 of them, break into your house, the first thing you do is run to the farthest room in your house, call law enforcement, and when they break through the door, you tell them to line up with their hearts next to each other, and you have a high-velocity bullet. And you're going to be so good at marksmanship, you're going to shoot the first one, and it's going to go through all 5 of their hearts. No, you're going to die. That's what you're telling your constituents. They're going to die. But it gets worse than that. One of your colleagues stood up and said, it's the innocent, honest, law-abiding citizens who are guilty because you've allowed them to steal your guns. Well, when they break into your garage and steal your vehicle, it's their fault that those gangbangers stole your vehicle and ran down 5 of your constituents. And then when you let them borrow the hammer next door, and your next door neighbor killed your next door neighbor with that hammer, it's your fault. You let them borrow the hammer. What kind of logic are you using here?
Mr. Tedesco, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote no to this because this is tragic for our rights and freedoms and for Second Amendment.
Mr.
Thank you.
Tedesco in the negative. Ms. Weinstein. Mr. DiPietro.
Thank you. I will not quote the wisdom of our founding fathers because I have learned today that many of my colleagues do not believe in our founding fathers. I will not quote the Second Amendment of the United States, nor the extremely strong, deliberate, and unabashed language of the New York State Civil Rights Law because I have learned today that Governor Cuomo and some of my colleagues do not believe in the Second Amendment or the New York State Civil Rights Law. I will not quote from our governor what he has said and pledged about transparency, openness, and the respect of the importance of hearing all sides of an issue because I have learned today as a freshman that Governor Cuomo does not care about the people's agenda, only his own. To be president, to beat Obama to the punch, and be the first on the 6 o'clock news tonight. I have learned today that this gun bill does absolutely nothing to protect our law-abiding citizens of our great state. It is crystal clear to me that this bill will not stop one criminal from committing a heinous act. This bill does infringe upon and again weaken our Second Amendment rights. While gun crimes are an extremely important issue, this assembly should have worked together to put forth the best bill we could, which would be a beacon to the rest of the country. We had that opportunity and we failed. Instead, this bill and this assembly will forever be remembered as the one who rammed a flawed, useless, self-serving bill through the dead of night with absolutely zero transparency, and the end game will be law-abiding citizens will turn into criminals overnight and lose more of their constitutional freedoms. I vote no, Mr. Speaker.
My administration has taken a series of actions right away, from strengthening our background check system, to helping schools hire more resource officers if they want them, to directing the Centers for Disease Control to study the best ways to reduce gun violence. But the truth is, making a real and lasting difference also requires Congress to act, and act soon.
I hate to get up in the morning.
Not that one.
30 years later, Kate Smith asked Mr. Berlin if he had a patriotic song she could perform on her radio show.
You know, they call this the GI generation.
And this is the anthem that got our country through World War II.
Remember?
Hello, everybody. It is my happy privilege to introduce a new song, God Bless America.